shake that suggested he'd never doubted himself a day in his life, smiled politely. "Ah, technology. Very important these days," he said in the tone people use when discussing necessary but unpleasant things, like garbage collection or root canals. "Someone has to keep the lights on," I replied, matching his smile with one of my own. The conversation died there, as they usually did, and Whitman excused himself to find more stimulating company. Mara shot me a look that could have frozen the champagne. "You could try harder, you know." "I could," I agreed, "but then I'd be lying." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. She moved away without another word, gravitating toward a cluster of her colleagues near the window. I watched her laugh at something Dr. Trevor Goss said, her head tilting back in that practiced way she'd perfected years ago. Goss, her dissertation advisor, stood too close to her, his hand resting on the small of her back in a gesture that looked casual but lasted 3 seconds too long. I'd been noticing those 3-second infractions for months now. "Rough crowd," said a voice beside me. I turned to find Coop, my best friend since college, holding 2 beers he'd somehow procured in this wine and cheese wasteland. "Cooper Williams, you beautiful disaster," I said, accepting the beer gratefully. "How did you even get in here?" "Told them I was your emotional support bartender," he grinned. "Plus, I brought a bottle of the good stuff as tribute." Coop owned a dive bar called The Bitter End, and he looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for working-class guy who tells it straight. His presence here was like finding an honest mechanic in a room full of used car salesmen. "So how's it feel, being married to Dr. Smarty Pants now?" he asked, nodding toward Mara. "About as good as a root canal performed by a drunk veterinarian," I said, watching Goss whisper something in my wife's ear that made her giggle like a sophomore. "That's specific, huh?" Before I could answer, Mara's voice cut through the academic chatter like a fire alarm. Everyone, I have an announcement." The room fell silent with the efficiency of a library during finals week. Mara stood near the windows, Goss beside her, both of them wearing expressions I couldn't quite read. She held up a manila envelope like it contained the cure for tenure anxiety. "I know this is my graduation party," she began, her voice carrying that theatrical quality she'd developed during her years of teaching. "But I have something important to share with all of you, my dear friends and colleagues." My stomach began performing gymnastics routines I didn't remember signing up for. As you all know, completing my PhD has been a transformative experience. It's helped me understand what I really want from life, what I deserve, and what I'm no longer willing to accept. She looked directly at me then, and I saw something in her eyes that made the room temperature drop about 20 degrees. "Ethan, could you come here, please?" Every face in the room turned toward me like I was a specimen under a microscope. I walked through the crowd, my feet feeling like they were made of concrete, while my brain ran through every possible scenario this could be leading toward. None of them ended well. 8 years ago, I married a good man," Mara continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "But good isn't always enough, is it? Sometimes we outgrow the people we once were and the people we once loved." The manila envelope crinkled as she opened it, and I caught a glimpse of official-looking documents inside. My mouth went dry as desert sand. "Personal growth requires difficult decisions," she said, pulling out a stack of papers. "And I've decided it's time for both of us to be free to pursue our authentic selves." She handed me the papers with a smile that belonged in a museum dedicated to the history of human cruelty. The header read, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," in bold, unforgiving letters. The room was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. 60 pairs of eyes watched me hold my divorce papers like I was performing in some twisted academic theater production. "Mara," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, You're serving me divorce papers at your graduation party? I thought it would be fitting, she replied. A celebration of new beginnings for both of us. Someone in the crowd, I think it was Professor Whitman, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Goss stood behind Mara with his arms crossed, looking like a bouncer at an exclusive club I'd just been banned from. I looked down at the papers, scanning the legal language that translated 8 years of marriage into property division and asset allocation. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my career protecting people from having their systems compromised, and here I was, completely blindsided by the most important hack of my life. You know what, Mara? I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You're absolutely right. I pulled a pen from my jacket pocket, the same pen I'd used to sign our marriage certificate, and flipped to the signature page. The scratching sound of ink on paper seemed amplified in the silence. Sometimes we do outgrow people, I continued, signing my name with deliberate precision. Sometimes we realize we've been settling for less than we deserve. I handed the papers back to her, and for just a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. Congratulations, Dr. Jarrett, I said, raising my beer bottle in a mock toast. I hope you get everything you've earned. The crowd began murmuring, a low buzz of academic gossip that would fuel faculty meetings for months. I turned to leave, but Mara's voice stopped me. Ethan, wait. Don't you want to know? Know what? I turned back to face her. That you and Professor Goss have been conducting extracurricular research? That you've been planning this for months? That every time you worked late at his office, you were really working on your exit strategy? Her face went pale, and Goss stepped forward like he was going to say something. I held up a hand to stop him. Save it, Trevor. I'm in cybersecurity, remember? I notice patterns, I track data, I see the connections other people miss. I looked around the room one last time, at all these brilliant academics who thought they understood human nature because they'd read about it in journals. You want to know the difference between you and me? I asked Mara. You think intelligence is about knowing things. I know it's about understanding systems. And lady, I just figured out exactly how this system works. I walked through the crowd toward the exit, and people stepped aside like I was radioactive. At the door, I turned back one more time. Enjoy the party, everyone, and Mara, thanks for the education. The Michigan night air hit me like a slap of reality as I walked to my car. Behind me, the faculty lounge glowed with warm light and the buzz of scandal, but I felt strangely calm. 8 years of marriage, reduced to signatures on legal documents, and whispered gossip among people I'd never see again. Coop caught up with me in the parking lot, slightly out of breath. Jesus, Ethan. That was either the most badass thing I've ever seen, or you just had a complete mental breakdown in front of half the university. Maybe both, I said, getting into my car. You know what the funny thing is, Coop? What's that? She thinks she won. I started the engine and rolled down the window. I'm leaving town tonight. Need to clear my head, figure out what comes next. Where you headed? South. Maybe Texas. I hear Austin's got a good tech scene. What about all your stuff? Your job? Your life here? I looked back at the building where my wife was probably already celebrating her freedom with her new boyfriend and their audience of academic enablers. My life here just ended, I said. Time to build a new one. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Mara and Goss in the window, standing close together, probably thinking they'd handled an unpleasant situation with admirable efficiency. They had no idea they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. You see, there's something most people don't understand about IT security specialists. We're not just good with computers. We're good at finding weaknesses in systems, exploiting vulnerabilities, and planning long-term strategies that other people can't see coming. And revenge? Well, revenge is just another kind of system. Austin in July felt like living inside a hairdryer, but I'd grown to love the honest brutality of it. Unlike Michigan, where people smiled while they planned your destruction, Texas heat came at you straight on, no pretense, no hidden agenda, just pure, sweaty misery that everyone acknowledged and dealt with together. My corner office at CyberShield Solutions overlooked the downtown skyline, and I'd earned every square foot of it. 3 years of 16-hour days, building security systems that could stop hackers from countries I couldn't pronounce, had turned me from Mara's husband who works in IT into Ethan Jarrett, the guy who saved our company from that ransomware attack. "Boss, you've got that look again," said Jenny Martinez, my lead security analyst, poking her head through my door. "The one that says you're either solving world hunger or planning someone's downfall." "Can it be both?" I asked, not looking up from my monitor where I was reviewing firewall logs with the intensity of a monk studying scripture. "Not on my watch," she laughed. "It's Friday afternoon, the servers are secure, and you've got that conference call with the Michigan people in 10 minutes. The Michigan people. For 3 years, I'd successfully avoided any business that might connect me to my former life. But CyberShield had landed a contract with a consortium of universities, including Michigan State. The irony was too perfect to pass up. "Jenny, remind me why we took this contract." "Because it pays extremely well, and because you said, and I quote, 'Sometimes the best revenge is living well and making them pay for the privilege.'" Smart girl. That's why I'd promoted her twice in 2 years. The conference call connected with the efficient beep of modern technology, and suddenly I was listening to voices from a world I'd left behind. Dr. Patricia Henley, the IT director, ran through their security requirements with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. "We need comprehensive protection for our research databases," she was saying. "We've had some issues with data integrity, and frankly, some of our faculty have been careless with sensitive information." "Define careless," I said, making notes on my tablet. "Well, for instance, we had one professor who was sharing research data with unauthorized parties. Personal relationships affecting professional judgment, if you understand what I mean." I understood perfectly. "And there have been some personnel changes recently," Dr. Henley continued. "We lost 2 senior faculty members last year under unfortunate circumstances. Dr. Goss resigned from his position as dean after some irregularities came to light, and Dr. Mara Jarrett's contract wasn't renewed due to questions about her research methodology." I set my pen down very carefully. "Dr. Jarrett, you said?" "Yes. Do you know her? She was in our psychology department. Brilliant woman, but there were some concerns about the validity of her data. Anonymous tips led to an investigation. And, well, academic integrity is paramount in our institution." "Anonymous tips. How interesting." "I'm sure you handled it appropriately," I said. "When would you like us to start the security audit?" After the call ended, I sat back in my chair and stared out at the Austin skyline. So Mara and Goss had both fallen from grace. The academic world was small and gossipy, and once your reputation was tarnished, recovery was nearly impossible. My phone buzzed with a text from Coop. "Dude, you need to see this. Check your email." I opened my laptop and found a message from Coop with the subject line, "Your ex-wife is officially pathetic." Attached was a screenshot of what looked like a LinkedIn message. The message was from Mara, sent to Coop's business account. "Hi, Cooper. I hope you're well. I'm trying to reach Ethan about something important. I know he's in Austin, and I was hoping you might help me get in touch with him. I'll be in town next week for a conference, and I'd really like to talk. It's been too long. Please tell him I miss him. Mara." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then picked up my phone and called Coop. "She actually wrote, 'I miss him,'" Coop said without preamble. "After what she did at that party, she has the nerve to say she misses you." "What did you tell her?" "Nothing yet. Wanted to check with you first. But Ethan, she sounds desperate. Word is, she's been trying to find you for months." "Let me guess," I said. Her academic career imploded. Goss turned out to be exactly the kind of man who abandons ship when things get rough, and now she's realizing that maybe the stable, reliable husband wasn't such a bad deal after all. Bingo. So what do you want me to tell her? I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Tell her I'll meet with her. The Four Seasons downtown, lobby bar, next Thursday at 8. Seriously? After everything she did? Coop, my friend, you're thinking like someone who wants closure. I'm thinking like someone who wants to see how deep the hole she's dug really goes. That's either really mature or really twisted. Again, maybe both. The week crawled by with the speed of a government website loading on dial-up internet. I found myself checking my appearance in mirrors more often, not because I wanted to impress Mara, but because I wanted her to see exactly what she'd walked away from. 3 years of gym memberships, better clothes, and the confidence that comes from professional success had transformed me from the awkward academic husband into someone who belonged in boardrooms and corner offices. Thursday evening arrived with typical Austin humidity, and I got to the Four Seasons 20 minutes early to stake out the best position in the lobby bar. I wanted to see her before she saw me, wanted that moment of observation that would tell me everything I needed to know about her current state of mind. She walked in at exactly 8 o'clock, and I had to admit she still knew how to make an entrance. The emerald dress was gone, replaced by a simple black outfit that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, but somehow looked desperate instead of elegant. Her hair was shorter, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. She scanned the bar, and when her eyes found mine, I saw something I'd never seen before in all our years together. Uncertainty. "Ethan," she said, approaching my table with the careful steps of someone walking on thin ice. "You look incredible." "Mara!" I stood and gestured to the chair across from me, the picture of polite professionalism. "You look tired." It wasn't a cruel observation, just an honest one, but I saw it hit her like a physical blow. "It's been a difficult few years," she said, settling into her chair and immediately reaching for the wine menu like it was a life preserver. "Has it?" I signaled the waitress. "2 glasses of the Cabernet, please. The good one." We sat in silence until the wine arrived, and I watched Mara struggle with where to begin. Finally, she took a large sip and dove in. "I made a mistake, Ethan. A huge mistake." "Which one? Cheating on me? Humiliating me in public? Or choosing Trevor Goss as your upgrade?" She flinched. "All of it. Everything. I was so focused on what I thought I wanted that I couldn't see what I was throwing away." "And what were you throwing away?" "A good man. A stable life. Someone who actually cared about me instead of just using me." I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. "Trevor used you?" "He used everyone. The research data, the graduate students, me. It was all just part of his system for getting ahead. When the investigation started, he threw me under the bus so fast I got tire tracks." "Investigation?" "Someone sent anonymous tips to the university about irregularities in our research. Data that didn't match, conclusions that weren't supported, collaborative work that looked suspiciously like one person doing all the work while someone else took credit. Sounds like someone who knew your work very well." That's what I thought. But Ethan, I swear to you, I never meant for any of this to happen. I got caught up in Trevor's ambition, and I lost sight of everything that actually mattered. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her fingers were cold, and I noticed she wasn't wearing a wedding ring anymore. "I know I have no right to ask this," she continued, "but I was hoping maybe we could try again. Start over. I'm a different person now." I looked down at her hand on mine, then back up at her face. "Are you?" "Yes. Completely. I've learned so much about myself, about what really matters in life. Success doesn't mean anything if you don't have someone to share it with." "Interesting." I gently pulled my hand away. "And what makes you think I'm the same person you left?" "You're not," she said quickly. "I can see that. You're more confident, more successful. You've built something amazing here." "I have. We could build something together again. Better this time. I know I hurt you, but—" "Mara," I interrupted. Do you know what I do for a living now? You're in cybersecurity, right? Some kind of consultant? I'm the head of cybersecurity for one of the fastest-growing tech companies in Texas. I design systems that protect people from having their most valuable assets stolen by people they trust. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I also do consulting work for various organizations, universities mostly, helping them protect sensitive data from being compromised by people who have authorized access but questionable judgment. Her face went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying that 3 years ago, you taught me a valuable lesson about trust and betrayal, and I've spent every day since then getting very, very good at my job. I finished my wine and stood up. Thank you for the drink, Mara. It's been educational. Ethan, wait. She grabbed my arm. Please, I know you're angry, but I'm not angry, I said, and realized it was true. Anger is what you feel when someone breaks your system unexpectedly. What I feel is something much more interesting. I leaned down so only she could hear me. You want to know the difference between revenge and justice, Mara? Revenge is personal. Justice is systematic. I straightened up and smiled. Enjoy your conference. I hear the keynote speaker is supposed to be excellent. As I walked away, I could feel her watching me, probably trying to figure out what I meant. She'd find out soon enough. The next morning, I was in my office early, reviewing the final details of my presentation for the Texas Tech Innovation Conference. As the keynote speaker, I'd be addressing an audience of academics, tech professionals, and business leaders about the intersection of technology and trust. It was going to be a very educational experience for everyone involved. The Austin Convention Center buzzed with the particular energy of people who believed they were changing the world through PowerPoint presentations and networking happy hours. I adjusted my tie in the green room mirror, watching tech entrepreneurs mingle with academic researchers like two different species trying to find common ground. Mr. Jarrett? A young woman with a clipboard and the harried expression of someone managing too many moving pieces approached me. I'm Sarah Chen, the conference coordinator. We're ready for your sound check. Perfect timing, I said, following her through the maze of backstage corridors. The main auditorium held about 800 people, and it was filling up fast. From the wings, I could see the crowd settling in, a mix of university professors, startup founders, and corporate executives, all united by their faith in the transformative power of technology. And there, in the third row, sat Mara. She'd positioned herself where I couldn't miss her, wearing a navy blue dress that I recognized from our marriage. It was a calculated choice, designed to remind me of better times, of the woman I'd once loved enough to build a life with. Ladies and gentlemen, the conference host announced, please welcome Ethan Jarrett, Chief Security Officer of CyberShield Solutions, speaking on trust, betrayal, and the human element in cybersecurity. I walked onto the stage to polite applause, my eyes sweeping the audience before settling on the camera at the back of the room. This presentation would be streamed live and archived online, visible to anyone who cared to search for it. Good morning, I began, my voice carrying easily through the auditorium's sound system. I want to start with a story about the most sophisticated hack I've ever encountered. The audience leaned forward slightly. Everyone loved a good cybercrime story. 3 years ago, I thought I had perfect security. I'd built what I believed were impenetrable defenses around my most valuable assets. I had monitoring systems, access controls, and multiple layers of protection. I was confident that no one could compromise my system without my knowledge. I clicked to my first slide, a simple diagram of a network with multiple security layers. But I made the classic mistake that brings down 90% of all security systems. I trusted the wrong person with administrative access. Mara shifted in her seat, and I saw her exchange a glance with someone sitting a few rows behind her, Dr. Trevor Goss, looking significantly less confident than he had at that graduation party 3 years ago. The attack wasn't sophisticated, I continued. No advanced malware, no zero-day exploits. Just someone with legitimate access who decided to steal everything they could and disappear into the night. The audience murmured appreciatively. This was exactly the kind of cautionary tale they'd come to hear. The interesting thing about insider threats is that they're not random. They follow predictable patterns. The perpetrator usually starts by testing boundaries, seeing what they can get away with. They build relationships with other compromised parties. They gradually escalate their access and their ambitions. I clicked to the next slide, a timeline showing the progression of a typical insider attack. In my case, the attacker had been planning their exit strategy for months. They'd identified a new target, someone they thought could give them better access to more valuable resources. They'd been secretly copying sensitive data and sharing it with unauthorized parties. Another click. A network diagram showing data flowing to external sources. But here's where the story gets interesting. You see, I'm not just a security professional. I'm also someone who believes in accountability. The room was completely silent now, and I could see Mara's face going pale. When someone steals from you, you have two choices. You can write it off as a loss and move on, or you can treat it as a learning experience and make sure it never happens again. I clicked to a new slide. Case study. Academic Data Integrity Investigation. Michigan State University. Mara's sharp intake of breath was audible even from the stage. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. When I discovered that sensitive research data was being shared inappropriately, I had a professional obligation to report it to the proper authorities. The slide showed a flowchart of the investigation process, with dates and outcomes clearly marked. The investigation revealed a pattern of academic misconduct spanning several years: falsified data, plagiarized research, and collaborative fraud involving multiple parties. The perpetrators had been so confident in their immunity that they'd left digital footprints everywhere. I saw Goss start to stand up, but Mara grabbed his arm and pulled him back down, too late to leave now without causing a scene. The beautiful thing about digital evidence is that it's permanent. Every email, every file transfer, every login attempt, it's all recorded somewhere. And when you know how to look, you can reconstruct an entire timeline of deception. The next slide showed email headers and metadata, anonymized but clearly documenting a pattern of misconduct. Both perpetrators lost their positions, their reputations, and their future prospects in academia. One of them tried to find new opportunities in the private sector, but reference checks have a way of revealing uncomfortable truths. I paused and looked directly at Mara. The other one has been trying to reconcile with their victims, apparently under the impression that forgiveness is something that can be negotiated rather than earned. The audience was completely absorbed now, probably thinking this was a hypothetical case study rather than a real-time revelation. But here's the most important lesson from this case, I said, clicking to my final slide. Trust isn't just about technology. It's about understanding human nature, recognizing patterns of behavior, and building systems that account for the fact that people will always be the weakest link in any security chain. I looked out over the audience, my eyes finding Mara one last time. The question isn't whether someone will try to betray you. The question is whether you'll be ready when they do. The applause was thunderous, and I saw several people in the audience taking notes furiously. As I walked off the stage, I caught a glimpse of Mara and Goss hurrying toward the exit, but the crowd was too thick for them to escape quickly. "Brilliant presentation," said Dr. Patricia Henley, appearing at my elbow as I reached the side of the stage. "I had no idea you were so familiar with our situation at Michigan State." "Professional interest?" I said. "I always follow up on my cases." "Your cases?" "I was the consultant who provided the initial security analysis that led to your investigation. Anonymous tip, as you called it." Her eyes widened. "You're the one who protected your university from further damage, yes. Sometimes the best security work is invisible until you need it." She shook my hand with considerably more enthusiasm than our phone conversation had warranted. We should discuss expanding our contract with CyberShield. I'd be happy to. But first, I think I need to address a few audience questions. I made my way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and business cards, until I reached the lobby where Mara and Goss were waiting by the elevators. They looked like two people who'd just realized they were standing in quicksand. "Ethan," Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That presentation was about cybersecurity best practices," I finished. "Did you learn anything useful?" "You destroyed our careers," Goss said, stepping forward with the bluster of a man who'd never learned when to cut his losses. "You ruined our lives over a personal grudge." "Trevor," I said, my voice calm and reasonable. "I reported academic misconduct to the appropriate authorities. If that ruined your life, maybe you should examine your life choices rather than blaming the messenger." "You had no right." "I had every right. And more importantly, I had evidence. Lots and lots of evidence." The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and other conference attendees began filing in. Mara grabbed Goss's arm. "Let's go," she said urgently. "Running away again?" I asked. "That seems to be your signature move." She turned back to face me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd once married, intelligent, fierce, capable of fighting back. "What do you want from us, Ethan? We've lost everything. Our jobs, our reputations, our future. Isn't that enough?" "I don't want anything from you, Mara. I stopped wanting anything from you the night you handed me those divorce papers in front of 60 people. Then why are you doing this?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Because you taught me something valuable that night. You taught me that actions have consequences, and that sometimes those consequences take a while to catch up with you." The elevator doors started to close, but I held them open with one hand. "You wanted a divorce so you could be free to pursue your authentic self. Congratulations. This is who you authentically are. Someone who cheats, lies, and betrays the people who trust them. I just made sure everyone else knows it too." I let the doors close and walked back toward the conference hall, where a group of potential clients was waiting to discuss security consulting contracts. Behind me, I heard the elevator carrying my former life away, probably forever. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. "Boss, your presentation is trending on LinkedIn. Whatever you did, it's working." I smiled and typed back, "Just giving people the information they need to make informed decisions." The rest of the conference passed in a blur of handshakes, business cards, and contract negotiations. By the time I got back to my office on Monday, CyberShield had 3 new clients and a waiting list for our consulting services. But more importantly, I'd sent a message that would ripple through both the academic and professional communities. Ethan Jarrett was not someone you could betray without consequences. That evening, I was reviewing security logs when my personal phone rang. The caller ID showed Coop's number. "Did you see the news?" he asked without preamble. "What news?" "Your ex-wife tried to check into a hotel in Dallas yesterday. Her credit card was declined. Turns out she's been blacklisted by 3 major hotel chains for unpaid bills." "Interesting." "And Goss got arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct at a bar near the conference center. Apparently, he was telling anyone who'd listen that his life was being destroyed by a vindictive ex-husband." "Even more interesting." "Ethan, what exactly did you do to these people?" I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the Austin skyline, lights twinkling in the darkness like stars in a digital constellation. "I gave them exactly what they deserved, Coop. Nothing more, nothing less." "And what's that?" "The truth. In my experience, that's usually enough. The beautiful thing about living in the information age is that everyone leaves digital footprints, and most people have no idea how deep those prints go or how long they last." 6 months after the conference, I'd settled into a comfortable routine of watching Mara and Trevor's lives unravel from a distance, like a scientist observing bacteria in a petri dish. My assistant Jenny knocked on my office door, carrying a tablet and wearing the expression of someone who'd just discovered something fascinating. "Boss, you need to see this," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Remember that background monitoring system you set up for tracking potential security threats? The one that scans social media, professional networks, and public records for patterns that might indicate insider threats? That's the one. Well, it flagged something interesting about your Michigan State contacts." She handed me the tablet, which displayed a comprehensive report on Dr. Mara Jarrett's recent activities. The algorithm had been busy. "She's been trying to rebuild her career," Jenny continued, "but every time she gets close to landing a position, something happens. References that seem solid suddenly become unavailable. Background checks reveal irregularities in her academic record. Professional networks that initially welcomed her gradually go quiet." I scrolled through the data, impressed by the thoroughness of the automated system I'd built. "What about Goss?" "Even worse. He's been blacklisted from 3 universities, 2 consulting firms, and a think tank. Apparently, word travels fast in academic circles." "It does indeed. But here's the interesting part," Jenny said, leaning forward. "They're both in Austin again. Mara registered for a career counseling seminar downtown, and Goss has been making rounds at local businesses, trying to find consulting work." I set the tablet down and considered this development. They're desperate. Very. And desperate people make poor decisions. She was right, of course. Desperation was like a virus that infected judgment, making people do things they'd never consider under normal circumstances. It was also an excellent motivator for the kind of mistakes that made my job easier. "Jenny, I want you to do something for me." "Name it." "Set up a shell company. Something that sounds like a legitimate consulting firm but doesn't actually exist yet. Make sure it has a professional website, some fake testimonials, and a job posting for academic consultants with expertise in psychology and education administration. You want to bait them. I want to give them an opportunity to reveal their true character. Sometimes the best security test is to see how people behave when they think no one is watching." 3 days later, I was sitting in the lobby of the Omni Hotel downtown, watching the elevator banks with the patience of a hunter waiting for prey. According to the automated monitoring system, both Mara and Trevor had applied for the fictional consulting position and been invited for interviews at this location. They arrived within minutes of each other, which suggested they were still in contact despite their mutual professional destruction. Mara wore a burgundy suit that probably represented a significant portion of her remaining savings, while Trevor looked like he'd borrowed his outfit from someone with better taste and more money. I watched them approach the concierge desk, where they were directed to Conference Room B on the mezzanine level. They'd be waiting there for quite some time, since no interviewer would be joining them. Instead, I took the elevator to the mezzanine and positioned myself at a table in the adjacent cafe, where the walls were thin enough to hear conversations from the conference room. I'd learned this trick during a security assessment for a law firm. Sometimes the most valuable intelligence came from people who thought they were speaking privately. "This is humiliating," Trevor's voice carried through the wall. "6 months ago, I was a dean. Now I'm begging for scraps from some startup consulting firm." "At least you're getting interviews," Mara replied. "Half the places I apply to won't even acknowledge my resume." "It's him. It's that vindictive little man you married. He's been systematically destroying our reputations." "You think Ethan is behind all of this?" "Who else? He has the connections, the technical knowledge, and the motivation. He's been playing a long game, making sure we can't rebuild our careers anywhere." There was a pause, and I heard the sound of chairs scraping against the floor. "Maybe we should fight back," Mara said quietly. "How?" "He's got the resources, the reputation, and apparently an entire network of people willing to sabotage us on his behalf. He's also got vulnerabilities. I was married to him for 8 years, Trevor. I know things about him that could be problematic if they came to light." This was interesting. I leaned closer to the wall, activating the voice recording app on my phone. What kind of things? Remember that cybersecurity contract he landed with the defense contractor in Michigan? The one that launched his career? Vaguely. He didn't get that contract because of his technical skills. He got it because he had access to inside information about the competing bids. Information he shouldn't have had. She was talking about the Morrison defense contract, the one that had indeed launched my career in cybersecurity. But her version of events was completely fabricated. You're saying he cheated? I'm saying he used his connections at the university to access information that gave him an unfair advantage. If that came out, it would destroy his reputation and probably land him in legal trouble. Can you prove it? I kept copies of everything, Trevor. Emails, documents, financial records. I thought they might be useful someday. The conversation continued, but I'd heard enough. They were planning to blackmail me with fabricated evidence, probably hoping to force me to back off and let them rebuild their careers in peace. It was exactly the kind of desperate, poorly thought-out scheme I'd been expecting. I left the hotel and drove back to my office, where I spent the next 2 hours crafting a comprehensive response to their emerging threat. By the time I was finished, I had a plan that would not only neutralize their blackmail attempt, but also provide a definitive end to their ability to cause further problems. The next morning, I called a meeting with my legal team. I need you to prepare a defamation lawsuit, I told our chief counsel, a sharp woman named Patricia Wong, who specialized in corporate reputation management. I also need you to draft a formal complaint to the Texas State Bar about attempted extortion by a non-licensed individual. What's the situation? I played the recording from the hotel conference room, watching Patricia's expression grow increasingly grim as she listened to Mara and Trevor plan their blackmail scheme. They're alleging criminal misconduct without evidence, she said when the recording ended. That's textbook defamation, and if they actually attempt to extort you, that's a felony. I want to be proactive about this. Can we file a restraining order? Based on this recording, absolutely. We can argue that they represent a credible threat to your personal and professional reputation. Do it. And Patricia, I want this to be very public. Press releases, court filings, the whole 9 yards. If they want to play games with my reputation, they should understand that I play to win. The restraining order was filed that afternoon, and by evening, it was making its way through the local news cycle. The story was irresistible. Disgraced academics attempting to blackmail a successful tech executive with fabricated evidence. My phone rang at 8 o'clock. Mara's number. Ethan, what have you done? Her voice was shaking. I protected myself from a criminal conspiracy. You should probably get a lawyer, Mara, a good one. You recorded us? That's illegal. Actually, Texas is a one-party consent state, which means I can record any conversation I'm legally entitled to overhear. Conference rooms in hotels don't have an expectation of privacy. This is insane. We never actually tried to blackmail you. No, but you plan to. And planning to commit a crime while discussing fabricated evidence is still conspiracy and defamation. There was a long pause. What do you want? I want you to disappear, Mara. Permanently. I want you to find a new career in a different state, preferably one where I'll never have to think about you again. And if we don't? Then you'll discover exactly how thorough my documentation of your academic misconduct really is. So far, I've only shared the highlights with Michigan State, but I have enough evidence to ensure that neither of you ever works in education again, anywhere in the country. The line went quiet for so long, I thought she'd hung up. I used to love you, she said finally. I know. That's what made your betrayal so educational. I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine, then sat on my balcony overlooking the Austin skyline. The city stretched out below me, full of lights and possibilities, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete satisfaction. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. Boss, the restraining order story just hit the national tech blogs. CyberShield's stock price is up 12% in after-hours trading. I smiled and typed back, Nothing like a good reputation management story to inspire investor confidence. The next few weeks passed quietly. Mara and Trevor both left Austin without attempting to contact me again. The restraining order was made permanent, and my legal team filed additional complaints with professional organizations in 3 states, ensuring that their misconduct would follow them wherever they tried to rebuild their careers. But I wasn't satisfied yet. Restraining orders and legal complaints were defensive measures. What I wanted was something more permanent, more public, and more devastating. I wanted to make sure that everyone who might ever consider betraying someone they claimed to love would understand exactly what that betrayal might cost them. It was time for the final phase of my plan. The thing about comprehensive destruction is that it requires patience, precision, and an understanding of how interconnected systems really are. Most people see individual failures, a lost job here, a damaged reputation there, but they miss the larger pattern of cascading consequences that can bring down an entire life. I'd spent 4 years studying Mara and Trevor's weaknesses, and now it was time to exploit all of them simultaneously. My opportunity came in the form of an invitation to speak at the National Cybersecurity Conference in Denver, an event that would be attended by security professionals, academic researchers, and business leaders from across the country. The theme was Insider Threats, Personal, Professional, and Institutional Vulnerabilities. I accepted immediately. "You're really going to do this?" Jenny asked, reviewing my presentation outline in my office. "This is comprehensive." "It's thorough," I corrected. "And it's all factual. Names have been changed to protect the guilty, but every detail is documented and verifiable." The presentation was titled Case Study in Academic Fraud, a 4-year investigation into institutional corruption and personal betrayal. It was 63 slides of meticulously documented evidence showing how 2 individuals had systematically abused their positions of trust for personal gain. "The timeline is devastating," Jenny observed, scrolling through the slides. "You've got financial records, email metadata, witness statements, and institutional responses all laid out chronologically. The beauty of digital evidence is that it tells a story, and this story has a very clear moral, which is, actions have consequences, and those consequences compound over time." The conference was held at the Colorado Convention Center, and my session was scheduled for the main auditorium on the final day. By the time I took the stage, word had spread that this was going to be something special. A real-world case study with implications for every organization represented in the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, looking out over an audience of nearly 2,000 cybersecurity professionals. "I want to tell you about the most expensive insider threat I've ever encountered." The first slide appeared behind me. Total institutional damage, $2.3 million in lost research, legal fees, and reputation management. This case began 4 years ago with what appeared to be a simple personal betrayal. A marriage ending, careers diverging, people moving on with their lives. But as we investigated deeper, we discovered a pattern of institutional fraud that had been hidden for years. I clicked to the next slide. A network diagram showing the connections between various academic institutions, research projects, and funding sources. The perpetrators had built a sophisticated system for redirecting resources, falsifying research data, and manipulating institutional processes for personal gain. They'd been operating with impunity because they understood that academic institutions are reluctant to acknowledge internal corruption. The audience was completely engaged now. This was exactly the kind of real-world case study they'd come to hear. But here's where the story gets interesting from a cybersecurity perspective. The investigation wasn't triggered by suspicious financial activity or anomalous data patterns. It was triggered by personal revenge. I paused for effect, letting that sink in. One of the victims of this fraud decided to conduct his own investigation, using the same methodologies we use to track advanced persistent threats in corporate networks. He treated the perpetrators like malicious actors, and their activities like an ongoing security breach. The next slide showed a timeline of investigative activities, with dates and methods clearly marked. Over the course of 4 years, this individual systematically documented every aspect of the fraud, building an airtight case that would stand up to legal scrutiny. But more importantly, he understood that the most effective defense against insider threats isn't just detection, it's deterrence. I clicked to a slide showing news headlines from various publications. University professors fired for research fraud. Academic integrity investigation reveals systemic corruption. Former dean arrested for extortion attempt. The perpetrators in this case didn't just lose their jobs. They lost their reputations, their professional networks, their ability to work in their chosen fields, and ultimately their freedom. The investigation revealed that their misconduct had been ongoing for years, affecting dozens of students, colleagues, and institutions. I saw several people in the audience taking notes furiously. But the most important lesson from this case isn't about the fraud itself. It's about the power of systematic documentation and strategic disclosure. The victim in this case didn't just want justice. He wanted to ensure that these individuals could never harm anyone else again. The final slide appeared. Outcome: complete professional destruction, criminal charges filed, institutional reforms implemented. Today, both perpetrators are facing criminal charges in multiple states. They've been blacklisted from every major academic institution in the country. Their professional reputations are so thoroughly destroyed that they're unemployable in any field requiring trust or integrity. I looked out over the audience, making eye contact with as many people as possible. The question I want to leave you with is this: how many insider threats in your organization are going undetected because you're not thinking systematically about human behavior? How many people are abusing your trust right now because they believe they'll never face consequences? The applause was thunderous and sustained. As I walked off the stage, I was immediately surrounded by conference attendees wanting to discuss the case study, exchange business cards, and explore consulting opportunities. But my attention was focused on my phone, which was buzzing with notifications. The presentation had been live-streamed, and clips were already circulating on social media. Within hours, it would be available on the conference website, archived permanently for anyone who wanted to search for it. That evening, I was having dinner at a restaurant near the convention center when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer it. Ethan? The voice was barely recognizable, but I knew it was Mara. I just watched your presentation. Did you learn anything useful? You've destroyed us. Completely. Do you understand that? I documented your actions and their consequences. If that destroyed you, maybe you should have made different choices. We can't get jobs, we can't get references, we can't even get apartment leases approved. Landlords are running background checks and finding articles about our criminal activities. Are you facing criminal charges? You know we are. Then the articles are accurate. There was a long pause, and I could hear her crying softly. I know I hurt you, Ethan. I know what I did was wrong. But this is beyond punishment. This is complete annihilation. It's accountability, Mara. For the first time in your life, you're experiencing actual consequences for your actions. What do you want from me? What would it take for you to stop this? I considered the question seriously. Nothing. Nothing? There's nothing you can offer me, nothing you can promise me, nothing you can do that would change anything. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them forever. That's not justice, Ethan. That's revenge. No, Mara. Revenge would have been personal and immediate. What I did was systematic and permanent. I built a comprehensive record of your misconduct and made sure it would follow you for the rest of your career. I paused, looking out the restaurant window at the Denver skyline. You taught me that actions have consequences. I just made sure those consequences were proportional to the harm you caused. The harm I caused? I asked for a divorce, Ethan. People get divorced every day. You committed academic fraud, betrayed your professional obligations, and attempted to blackmail me with fabricated evidence. The divorce was just the beginning of a pattern of behavior that revealed who you really are. And who am I? You're someone who takes whatever you want and assumes you'll never have to pay for it. You're someone who betrays trust as casually as other people change clothes. You're someone who destroys other people's lives and then acts surprised when your own life gets destroyed in return. The line was quiet for a long time. I used to love you, she said finally. I know, and I used to love you too. But love isn't enough when it's built on a foundation of lies and selfishness. So this is it? This is how it ends? This is how it ends, Mara, with you finally understanding that your actions have consequences and that some consequences last forever. I hung up and turned off my phone, then finished my dinner in peaceful silence. Tomorrow I would fly back to Austin, back to my successful company and my satisfying life, back to a world where people were held accountable for their choices. Behind me, I was leaving the wreckage of 2 lives that had been destroyed not by external forces or bad luck, but by the inexorable logic of cause and effect. It was the most complete and satisfying conclusion I could have imagined. But as I would soon discover, Mara had one more card to play. The rooftop bar at the Frostbank Tower offered a commanding view of Austin's skyline, and on this particular Thursday evening in October, the sunset painted the city in shades of amber and gold that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. I stood near the railing, watching traffic flow along the highways below like streams of light, waiting for what I knew would be the final confrontation of this 4-year campaign. Mara had called that morning, her voice steady and determined in a way I hadn't heard since our marriage ended. I want to meet with you one last time, she'd said. Tonight, the Frost Tower rooftop bar, 8 o'clock. Why? Because I have something you need to hear, something that changes everything. I could have refused, could have hung up and continued with my life as if she no longer existed. But curiosity had always been one of my weaknesses, and after 4 years of systematic destruction, I wanted to see what final gambit she thought might save her. She arrived precisely on time, emerging from the elevator in a black dress that looked expensive, but somehow desperate, like armor worn by someone who knew they were already defeated. Her hair was shorter now, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when we were married, but she still moved with the confidence of someone who believed she could talk her way out of any situation. Ethan, she said, approaching my table with the measured steps of someone walking across a minefield. Thank you for coming. Mara, I gestured to the chair across from me. You look determined. I am. She sat down and immediately signaled the waitress. 2 glasses of wine, please, the Pinot Noir. We sat in silence until the wine arrived, and I studied her face, trying to read the calculation behind her eyes. This wasn't the broken woman who had called me after the Denver conference. This was someone who thought they had found a way to fight back. So, I said, raising my glass in a mock toast, what changes everything? She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, setting it on the table between us like a weapon. Do you remember Sarah Morrison? She asked. The name hit me like a physical blow. Sarah Morrison had been a graduate student at Michigan State when I was working on the defense contract that launched my cybersecurity career. She'd also been someone I'd cared about deeply, someone whose trust I'd valued more than professional success. I remember Sarah. She was beautiful, wasn't she? Brilliant, too. The kind of woman who could have had any future she wanted. I kept my expression neutral, but my heart was racing. What's your point, Mara? My point is that Sarah Morrison didn't have the future she wanted. She had the future you gave her. She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photographs, spreading them across the table like tarot cards, revealing an unwelcome fortune. The photos showed Sarah and me together, at conferences, at restaurants, at my apartment. They were clearly taken without our knowledge, probably by a private investigator. "You were having an affair with her while we were married," Mara continued. "A married professor carrying on with his graduate student. Very unethical, very career-ending, if it came to light." I looked at the photographs, remembering those moments with Sarah, the conversations about cybersecurity theory, the late nights working on research projects, the gradual realization that we'd become something more than professional colleagues. "These photos prove nothing illegal," I said. "No, but they prove a pattern of behavior. A married man in a position of power exploiting his relationship with a vulnerable student." She pulled out another set of documents. "Sarah filed a complaint with the university's ethics board. Did you know that?" I didn't know that. Sarah and I had ended our relationship when she graduated, and we'd agreed it was better for both our careers if we maintained professional distance. I'd assumed she'd moved on with her life, just as I'd tried to move on with mine. "She withdrew the complaint," Mara continued, "but not before it was documented. She also kept copies of your emails, your text messages, your promises about helping her career in exchange for personal considerations." "That's not what happened." "Isn't it? Because according to Sarah's statement, you used your influence to get her hired at Morrison Defense Systems, the same company that gave you your first major cybersecurity contract. Quite a coincidence." The pieces of her strategy were becoming clear now. She was trying to reframe my relationship with Sarah as a quid pro quo arrangement, an abuse of power that would destroy my reputation just as thoroughly as I'd destroyed hers. "Where is Sarah now?" I asked. "That's the tragic part of this story, Ethan. Sarah Morrison died in a car accident 3 years ago. She was driving home from a job she hated, working for a company that had hired her based on a recommendation from a married professor who'd been sleeping with her." The words hit me like a physical assault. Sarah was gone, and I'd never known. While I'd been building my career and planning my revenge against Mara, Sarah had been struggling with the consequences of choices we'd both made. "She left behind a letter," Mara said, pulling out a handwritten document. "A confession, really. About the affair, about the pressure you put on her to keep quiet, about how guilty she felt for destroying our marriage." She handed me the letter, and I recognized Sarah's handwriting immediately. The words blurred as I read them, but the content was clear. Sarah had blamed herself for our affair, had carried guilt about it for years, and had been planning to come forward with the truth before her accident. "This letter destroys everything you've built," Mara said quietly. "Your reputation, your company, your future. If this comes to light, you'll be finished just as thoroughly as Trevor and I have been finished." I set the letter down and looked at her across the table. "What do you want?" "I want you to call off the dogs. I want you to stop the systematic destruction of our lives. I want you to use your influence to help Trevor and me rebuild our careers. And if I don't, then tomorrow morning, this letter and these photographs go to every major tech publication, every cybersecurity blog, and every professional organization you belong to. Your keynote presentations will be remembered as the hypocritical rantings of someone who was just as corrupt as the people he was condemning." I picked up my wine glass and took a long sip, buying time to think. The letter was devastating, and the photographs were damaging enough to support Mara's narrative. Even if I could prove that my relationship with Sarah hadn't been coercive, the appearance of impropriety would be enough to destroy my credibility. But as I looked at Mara's triumphant expression, I realized she'd made the same mistake that had destroyed her academic career. She'd underestimated her opponent. "Mara," I said, setting down my wine glass, "do you know what I've been doing for the past 6 months? Building your consulting empire and destroying our lives. Among other things, yes. but I've also been working with a private investigator to document every aspect of your misconduct. Not just the academic fraud, but everything. Your financial irregularities, your tax evasion, your attempts to manipulate institutional processes for personal gain. Her confident expression flickered slightly. More importantly, I continued, I've been in contact with Sarah Morrison's family, her sister specifically, a lawyer who's been investigating the circumstances of Sarah's accident. The color drained from Mara's face. It turns out Sarah didn't write that letter, Mara. The handwriting analysis proved it was forged. And those photographs? They were taken by the private investigator you hired to dig up dirt on me, but they were taken out of context, and some were digitally manipulated. I reached into my own jacket and pulled out a tablet, opening it to a video file. This is security footage from the hotel where you met with your investigator last month. You can clearly see him showing you the forged letter and explaining how to use it for maximum impact. The video played silently, showing Mara and a man in a cheap suit examining documents and photographs. Even without audio, their conversation was clearly conspiratorial. Forgery, extortion, defamation of a deceased person, I said, closing the tablet. That's 3 felonies, Mara, and this time I have every